Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Mary Ray Perry, Associate Director of Alumni Relations at Washington University. I am so excited to welcome alumni parents and friends to today's program featuring Lauren Herring, 2007 Olin MBA graduate. Our audience is diverse with participants viewing from 22 states today. A special welcome to our current students and members of the class of 2020, as this might be your first alumni event. For those of you who are parents, we hope your students are having a good start to this unusual semester. Welcome to all of you. Now, before we begin, I'd like to explain the format for today's session. You will only hear and see me and our presenters. The webinar will last about 1 hour. Following Lauren's presentation, we will have plenty of time for questions. We encourage you to participate by asking questions through the Q&A option. To do that, type a question in the Q&A box at any time during the talk. Thank you to all of you who have already submitted questions through your registration. During the Q&A session, we will get to as many questions as we can. The webinar is being recorded and we will share it on the Alumni Association YouTube and on our website following the event. It is now my pleasure to introduce and welcome Jen Witten, Associate Dean and Director, Olin Business School, Weston Career Center. Jen joined the Olin Business School in July 2018. Jen has spent nearly 2 decades in higher education, serving undergraduate and graduate students in student affairs and career development. Before coming to WashU, Jen led career services teams and was an instructor at both Arizona State University and Indiana University. At Washington University, Jen and her team at the Weston Career Center are focused on preparing our students not only for their first job, but also for their careers well into the future, connecting with our strong alumni network and expanding the opportunities available to our students through proactive outreach and employer engagement. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Witten.
Thank you, Mary Ray. As Mary Ray mentioned, my name is Jennifer Witten, and I'm the Associate Dean and Director of the Weston Career Center. And I'm happy to be able to introduce Lauren Herring, who will be leading the webinar today. I'd like to share with you a little bit more about Lauren's background. Lauren is a graduate of the Olin Business School, completing her MBA in 2007. She is the CEO of Impact Group, the largest woman-owned career coaching company supporting over 200 Fortune 500 companies worldwide. Over the past 30 years, Impact Group has successfully helped hundreds of thousands of people find jobs. Additionally, Lauren has donated Impact Group services to thousands of individuals in underserved communities, helping them find jobs, dignity, and economic independence. She has received the Game Changer Award by Workforce Magazine and has been published or quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Fast Company. Lauren's passion for making a positive impact led her to write Take Control of Your Job Search, as well as her previous book, This Side Up. When not running her business, Lauren can be found running the streets of St. Louis while training for a triathlon or spending time with her husband, Ted, and their 2 young children. We're excited to have Lauren join us today for a very timely and important topic about mastering your emotions while job hunting. Lauren, thank you for joining us, and I know, like many of the people on the call today, I'm looking forward to hearing more about what you have to share with us.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation and the warm welcome. It's a pleasure to be speaking to my fellow alumni and other students and parents and family members. It's a great honor to be here with you today. And thank you also, Jen, because as you were talking about the book, Jen was also a contributor to some of the aspects of the book as well. So I appreciate her support as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen here. Hopefully everything goes properly. I think we're good. So we're talking today about taking control of your job search and mastering the 10 emotions to land the job. So as we get started, I just want to do a quick poll to know who it is that we have with us today. And Mary Ray, if you can go ahead and post that, please. Want to just get a little bit of an understanding so I can tailor some of my comments a little bit. And thank you, all of you, to those of you who submitted some questions earlier as well, so that I can pepper some of those pieces in also. So with that, we'll give it just another minute, and I think we can go ahead and show the results. All right, so a pretty good split between early mid-career, executive level, and then also some people who are supporting loved ones through this process. So it's a great combination, and I hope to have some content for all of you. All right, well, if maybe you can take a moment and put in the chat some of the emotions that you see people struggle with in the job search, or maybe some emotions that you're currently struggling if you're going through this. One of the reasons I wrote this book is because, yes, there's hundreds or even thousands of books out there right now that are that talk about the what to do in the job search, but the how is just as important, and you know, the emotional piece is something that is really not really addressed, and something that in our work dealing with people finding employment across the globe, we see that that emotional support is one of the biggest keys that we see. Lack of control, depression is an example that we're seeing here. Yeah, so anger, frustration, fear, helplessness, hopelessness, lots of different emotions going through. So this is exactly why I wrote this book, because the emotions are there whether we want them to be or not. And so how do we actually take control of that situation rather than let them control us? I divided the book, Take Control of Your Job Search, into 3 main sections. I talk about emotions of loss, emotions that paralyze you, and then emotions that move you forward with momentum. Loss, I talk about grief, sadness, anger, fear. Paralysis is denial, frustration, anxiety, loneliness. And then momentum, confidence, self-compassion, and excitement. But the interesting thing about even some of those positive emotions is they can have, they're a double-edged sword in some ways too. So how do we make sure to control and oversee our emotions so that we're putting out the right energy all the time through our job search? The conversation that I'm going to have today is really grouping some of these emotions, and then we're going to address each of these groups with a particular job search strategy. And we'll start out by grief, sadness, lack of confidence, and shame. So these are a lot of the emotions that pull us inward. Sometimes they can stop us in our tracks. And then, you know, it is so difficult then to be moving forward. So one of the biggest things that I advise people, and we have over 250 coaches worldwide that support people through career transition, is help people to feel it. Bottling emotions up is one of the worst ways to deal with what's going on. And then it, like I said, the emotions are there no matter what you want. And so it's coming out in some other ways, and oftentimes through some critical health issues. So we worked with one gentleman who was just, like I said earlier, he was bottling it up and trying to compartmentalize to the extreme and just power through a job search without really allowing himself to feel what was going on. When we uncovered how this is actually starting to affect his health in other ways, and then how does that show from an example to his young daughters, then he realized, wow, I need to do something differently about this. So the advice that our coach gave to this individual was, yes, compartmentalization can have a valued place in a job search, but not when you're blocking it out entirely. So allow yourself to feel it. In this case, what are 10, 15 minutes that you can block out on your calendar in the morning and in the evening, and just deeply experience the emotions that you're feeling right now? write it down, express yourself. There's actually a study out there that speaks to when you are actually writing about your emotions in job search. There is a study that shows that you're likely to find a job faster than if you're not writing about your emotions and writing things down. So that's an academic study that shows that expressing yourself, especially if you're an introvert, that writing piece, journaling, can be really valuable. In the case of an extrovert, find a friend and go on a socially distanced walk in today's world, as one example. Or, is your partner someone that you can speak to about what's going on, or find someone so take that time to feel it, book it on your calendar if you need to, and then when that time is over, turn the page and get back to work. So just a little trick there for one way to experience some of those emotions and then move forward. Also, taking action. This is so critical that a lot of times in job search or in any sort of situation where you're just blocked, just move one rock. What is one action that you can take to move forward? The sense of progress in itself is something that you can then celebrate, feel a sense of accomplishment, which then promotes you to take the next step. So in the world of COVID these days, maybe this is as simple as get out of bed, get out of your jammies, and dress up, and even put some makeup on if you're a woman, for example, if that's something that resonates with you. Just those little steps can then start the process to take that next action. Other examples could be work on your resume, have a target for make 5 networking contacts, just make little goals and then allow yourself to celebrate those goals. All right, the job search strategy I want to focus on here for these emotions is focus on your personal brand. Now, some of this you might be saying, what in the world is a personal brand? Or, oh yeah, I've heard about that. It has to do with your resume and your LinkedIn profile, and let's make sure that's all aligned. I want to argue that focusing on your personal brand is actually something much deeper and much more critical than just what's your social profile look like. Your personal brand at its heart is answering the question, who am I? And it's even more than that. It's what do you want to do? What do you want to be known for? Who are you at your best? So imagine when you were doing your work so well, or maybe for some of you students, a project that you were working on. What is the work you have accomplished so well that maybe you didn't even need to be recognized because you knew you were doing so great? Or what was the type of project you were working on the last time you got promoted that was like, yeah, that was a big win for me and I was recognized for doing great work. So when you think about who you are at your best, then this is something that you can also then package to the value you're bringing to an organization. This is critical for several reasons, because when you're networking, you want to be crystal clear about what you want to do and why you're great at it. Why should this person that you've reached out to for help, why should they put their neck on the line to then put your name in the hat for another opportunity, if that's maybe what the ask is for? You want to be really easy to help. You're easy to help when you're really clear about what you're looking for. And then you want to make it so easy that there's no reason that they're actually going to look good by putting your name in front of someone in either HR or in a management position around an opportunity that you're interested in. So this is critical because it makes you very easy to help about the value you're going to bring to an organization and the clarity around the kind of role that you're looking for. Just as importantly, on the emotional side, I love personal branding because it helps you to unleash your inner rock star. So here's an example of a woman, a CMO at a Fortune 100 company, chief marketing officer, that we worked with who was let go because a new CEO was in town and he brought in a whole new team. We've all heard stories about this. So she had major successive career wins. And at the same time, in her job search, she was feeling about this small. She felt like Susan, the job seeker, not Susan, the senior executive who kicks butt in marketing. So through her coaching process, by focusing on personal brand, this woman was then able to put herself in the mindset of, yeah, I did have some amazing career accomplishments, and that's why I've been so successful in my career. And that's who I'm bringing with me to an interview, not the little job seeker who is just feeling grateful for any opportunity that comes her way. And think about it, if a seasoned executive at that level can feel this way, any of us can feel this way, because this is a complicated and difficult process. So whenever you're not feeling at your best, then go back to your personal brand. Who are you at your best? Remember that person who was successful in his or her career, where you have just rocked it out of the park, and that's the person you bring with you to interviews. That's the person that you're talking to people as you're networking. So I love the concept of personal brand as a huge confidence boost throughout your entire job search. The next component of the next emotions that I want to work through here are frustration and loneliness. And when I talk to job seekers, the number one frustration that I hear about is about the resume black hole. And I heard that in some of the questions that were asked in the coming on to the presentation. So yes, I want to make it clear that everyone is frustrated by this, and that the worst way, unfortunately, to look for a job is by clicking apply, 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 and then you hear nothing. And I'm going to give some direct feedback about what the alternative is there. The other thing that leads to not only is frustration, but extreme loneliness, because if you are sitting behind a computer, especially in the days of COVID, and just focusing on apply, 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 it can be a very lonely process. Other things that I hear people are frustrated about is, you have a great interview and then you don't get the job, or maybe you got it up to the last position and then someone else got the job. These can all be just excruciating emotions. Some people might just be frustrated that you're let go in the first place, or in the world that we're living in today, you're just mad at the world, that the pandemic is the source of all this strife that you're feeling. The other thing that when you're feeling frustrated and lonely, I urge people to rely on what I call a super team. And this is think of it like a personal board of advisors, or your kitchen cabinet, whatever you want to call it. These are the people that you can go to, that you trust, that are going to tell you the truth, whether you want to hear it or not sometimes. And they're also the people that are just going to be there to give you that hug and word of support unconditionally when things are tough during the job search. You need to create a super team. I really advise that people have the category of people in one camp that are that unconditional support, that when you need to get a little bit of confidence, they're going to remind you about your personal brand, why you're awesome, and that let's just go out there and attack it again. And then you need the other piece, maybe more on the professional side. Could be some previous mentors, colleagues that you respect, former bosses that were supportive of you. And these are the people that you want to be connecting with as it relates to interview practice. Get them to do mock interviews with you so that they can, and make sure that they're going to be the people that are going to be give you constructive criticism, so that it's not like, oh, that was a great answer. No, you need to hear the specifics about, okay, you started to get a little wordy there, go back and let's do it again. Those are the kind of people that you need to have your back during a job search. So one of the reasons why the resume black hole is so frustrating is that nowadays the number is probably in the range of upwards of 95% of jobs sometimes will never be looked at by a human being. They call it an applicant tracking system. So the technology that drives the application process is run by artificial intelligence. And sometimes it can even be so bad as if you click, if on your resume it says VP, but the job description says vice president, your job might, or your resume might not go through. So that's why it is so important to be focused on your networking. And I know a lot of people might in their mind be thinking networking looks like, sleazy handing out business cards at various in-person happy hour functions, but there is a lot more to networking than just going and beating the streets and throwing out your resume to anyone who will look at it. So let's go into a little bit more of the research. You've probably heard the data about networking being critical, but let me make it a little bit clearer here for you. This is a survey that was done recently that looked at the number of people that were hired based on application style. So 1 out of 152 people who applied online were hired. The 10x reverse of that is 1 out of 16 of people from an internal referral was hired. That is a 10x difference, and why it is so important for you to have an internal referral for any position you're looking for. So I read an example, a story one time. I thought it was hilarious, just to make it set in a little bit more. So think of it like you're flying. Being referred in from an internal resource is first class. Getting a recruitment agency to refer you, that is business class. Sourced in from an internal HR or recruiter, that is economy plus. Applied online is back row, middle seat, crying child. This is not where you want to be sitting. You want to be sitting in first class where people are referred and literally handing your resume to someone with a referral and a recommendation. So how do you get connected in this world of LinkedIn where sometimes it just feels like anyone can connect, but what do you do with that? So here's a couple of examples. First of all, go to your existing network. And I think we all have our immediate people that we're really close to. While that's great, and those can be your super team, those people are usually not the greatest source for your connections to opportunities. You want to go to a little bit further out, your peripheral resources. So who are people maybe that you worked with 10 years ago? What about people that you went to high school with? What about people at WashU that maybe you knew just the slightest bit, but hey, now is a perfect time to reconnect. So you want to look at your second degree connections at companies that you're targeting. So let's get very rifle shot focused rather than scatter shot or shotgun. So be very targeted in 10 to 15 companies that you are really interested in working for. And then supercharge your networking at those companies. And so you can go on LinkedIn and type in whatever company that you're interested in, and then look at those second degree connections that work there. And then go back to your WashU network, your high school network, people that you used to work with, and reach out to them on LinkedIn. Make sure they are your first degree connections so that you can then grow your second degree connections exponentially. Then once you see those first and second degree connections that work at the companies you're interested in, that's when it's great to start your networking. And a lot of times, some people might think that the word networking has a little bit of a dirty connotation to it. So perhaps just think about it. Again, this is a mental game. of this is reconnecting. It's not networking. It is reconnecting with long lost friends, people that might have been, aspirational people back in college. Well, guess what? You're all peers now in the world of work. You're all alumni. Just reach out and ask for 15 minutes. Again, being very clear because you've done your work on your personal brand. The other piece that you think about with connecting is look at the people that you think might be the hiring manager for a particular position that you're interested in. And sometimes you can figure that out through networking or through LinkedIn. And once you get a little bit of clarity of who some of those players are that you really want to get in front of, connect with them. And a lot of times if you have a nice connection note of why you want to connect, they're oftentimes willing to accept your invitation. And then once you're connected, it's a great opportunity to start looking at what they post and what they like or what they comment. So if someone is posting something on LinkedIn, perfect opportunity then to go in and comment on what they post. As someone who has done a lot of posting on LinkedIn in the past, I can tell you when someone you don't know all of a sudden is commenting on your post, it kind of gets your attention. Who's that? Why are they interested in what I have to say? Okay, it feels like a pick-me-up. Everyone likes to be liked, and it gets people's attention. So then once someone is recognizing, oh, this person is starting to interact with me on LinkedIn, then that is now a situation where you have built a relationship. And guess what? They're now much more willing to be open to receiving a message from you that includes something about a position that is open or an opportunity that they might have in the future. Or maybe they don't, but they're willing to take a meeting or a conversation. So a perfect example of how this has played out for me personally recently is as I've been out promoting the book, I have been working to get on various podcasts. There's one of the top podcasts for job seekers that I was aspirationally wanting to be on. And it said very clearly in the notes that I do not take requests from PR people. I don't put people on the show that just, kind of submit a regular media package. Well, guess what? I hired a PR person in a company to do all this work for me. Well, that wasn't going to work in this case. So what I started doing in this process is then looking at what he has posted, we're interacting. He then comments on my comments. I shared one of his posts that he was clearly passionate about, and then tagged several of my contacts that I knew would be interested in it. So I'm now on his radar screen, and we are now in the conversation of scheduling me for that booking. So anyway, perfect example of someone who wanted to put himself out like he was untouchable, but guess what? Now we're in conversation, now we have a relationship. So hopefully that gives a few examples and ideas of how to move forward with networking in a socially distant environment, but where you're still working on true relationships. The last section of the emotional journey that I want to focus on is fear and anxiety, because especially in the world of COVID, frankly, it's never been scarier, I would think, in a lot of ways for people to be looking for a job. Not only do we have, the financial concerns that come with job search in the first place, but obviously there's health concerns and all sorts of other kinds of things going on. So we also talk about, a lot of people have concerns around interviewing and networking. Like I said, can you reframe networking so it's no longer, something that only extroverts do well, but hey, I'm just reconnecting with people. Interviewing, it is all about practice, 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 because you have to get comfortable with just knowing your answers to questions that you're going to get, questions about strengths, If you're a salesperson, questions about like how you've hit your quota, or talking about your communication style, leadership style. Those are all examples of, you're going to get those types of questions. So how do you create stories based on your own personal examples that will demonstrate how you have showed up in creating a story that someone's going to remember about the interviewing process. You want to practice in-person interviewing. You want to practice phone interviewing. You want to practice Zoom interviewing. You're probably going to have all different types of interviewing these days, so you want to make sure you're practicing in all sorts of different environments. And then the other thing that I really recommend before an interview is visualizing the entire process beforehand, going exactly how you want it to happen, before, during, and after, and the responses that you're going to give and the responses that the interviewer will have to how you show up. Another example, in addition to interviewing, is one of my favorite talks is from a woman named Amy Cuddy, C-U-D-D-Y. And she talks about how when you do the Superman or the Wonder Woman pose before an interview, it actually creates additional testosterone in your body so that you have physiologically more confidence showing up in the interview. So I highly recommend even going into a bathroom stall before an interview and do your visualization and do your Superman or Wonder Woman pose. The other piece is ask for help, especially in this environment that we're in right now. People want to help. I would say I've never seen an environment where people want to help more. And imagine if the shoe were on the other foot. If someone asked for your help, how would you want to respond? Focus on what you can control. This is a perfect example of, what you can't control the pandemic, you can't control the economy, but you can control how you spend your time. And you want to spend your time on the high value activities, which are personal branding and networking and practicing for your interview and other pieces like that. Lastly, watch your self-talk. I think especially women, but all of us can get very down on ourselves during difficult times, and you start saying, well, I blew it, I shouldn't have done that. Like, the more you get into those kind of conversations, the more you go down into a deep spiral. So by watching your self-talk and saying positive words to yourself, then you're that much more likely to then be in a positive frame of mind. Fear and anxiety, honestly, is the reason why I wrote this book. A number of years ago, I met a gentleman that I talk about in the book who literally, he was an executive and was literally in hyperdrive on his job search. I feel like when I met him for a networking meeting, he threw the entire kitchen sink straight at me, and I was so overwhelmed by the PowerPoints and the brochures and the spreadsheets. I was like, oh my gosh, this man's fear is driving his job search. I'm sure in his mind, he felt like he was just showing how hard he was working, and I'm working this hard, and so this is what you're going to get from me as an employee. But what came across to me is desperation. And so this is a situation where he thought he was showing up one way, he was showing up in a completely opposite way that was detrimental to his personal brand. So that's why it's so important to be totally clear on, having your super team to be able to play that back to you and say, like, okay, I think you just need to take a deep breath here, and let's look at this a little deeper, because that's a perfect example where taking a little bit more time to feel it and go through some of those other exercises would have probably helped him out a lot. Like I said, after meeting him, that's where I felt like, wow, this is what is needed in the job search literature today. So a couple ideas on how to manage fear and anxiety. First of all, in our hyper plugged in world, one way that we can watch our fear and anxiety is to unplug. And so this could be, saying there's an hour a day that I just don't even pick up my phone, or during dinner time, I don't look at my phone because that's time I'm going to focus on my family. Or some people also will create email just for their job search, because you could be looking to see about that Amazon drop off, but all of a sudden, right before dinner, you look and you see you didn't get a job, and now the whole evening's shot when you weren't prepared for that. So also to think about with Unplug, more time on your job search does not necessarily always equal more productivity. So again, make sure you're focusing on the right things, not just throwing time into the process. The other thing that I recommend is that we look at the root cause of some of the emotions that you're going through. So, we've worked with a woman once, for example, who was really freaked out about interviewing. And when we went back and looked at the root cause, she realized that she was mocked during a presentation that she gave in 7th grade. And that whole thing of like, oh, I hate public speaking, people are going to make fun of me, that stuck with her in every sort of public speaking situation that she had experienced through the rest of her life. So how can you go in and unpack where that is? And is that something where you can say, okay, are you going to let that 12-year-old girl and those emotions run the rest of your life? Or can we, as a friend of mine who wrote a book called Fully Human, Susan Packard, say, name it, claim it, and let it go. So name the root cause, own the behavior, and then, okay, now I can move forward beyond this. Now, obviously, if we're talking about much deeper kind of psychiatric issues or therapeutic issues, then I urge you to get the right kind of support. But in a lot of cases, by looking deeper at what the root cause is, you can find out maybe what some of these blocks might be. And similar here is like what I was saying earlier about the reframing. So where networking can now be connecting. The last thing on this front is really thinking about what's the worst that can happen. And I know this sounds like a really terrible idea in one sense, but think about it this way, that a lot of times the black cloud of fear, the uncertainty that just the fear that generalized uncertainty creates in us can be more overwhelming actually than the reality of what the worst case scenario actually is. So if you get very specific about what's the worst that can happen, and then you name that, and then say, okay, well, how do I, number one, try and keep that thing from happening? But number two, what if it does happen? How do I prepare? And what do I do? My own personal example was I had a really difficult business problem last year. And it was the kind of thing that was waking me up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., just pit in my stomach, what is going to happen, and again, worst case scenario thinking, like without really thinking about it, I'm like, are we going to go out of business? I'm going to lose all these clients. Everything was just terrible. And then I got real specific when I decided, hey, I've got a solution for this. I thought about what's the legitimate worst thing that can happen. Okay, I could lose a client. Okay, it was a big client, over $1 million. So that would hurt, but would we make it? Yes, I can make it. We would make it past it. It would hurt. We'd have to make some adjustments in our team. We'd have to change some things around, but we could make it. And at that point, I was able to start thinking through, okay, how do I keep that from happening? How do I make sure that I'm doing all of these steps to keep that worst case from happening? And fortunately, in my case, the worst case didn't happen, but once I named it and was able to start planning more specifically and concretely, I was able to sleep better at night. So think about what the worst case scenario could be in your world. And I mean, maybe in some cases it could be really bad. Like, what if I can't find a job for 6 months? Or what if I'm not able to start paying the house bills? Well, those could be legitimate concerns. Well, then again, how do you start making decisions now so that you're not panicking when, if that actually does come to pass? Let's see, I have a few last comments here that I'll go through of if you're supporting someone going through a job search. Here's some ideas to think about for the super team. First of all, listen. You don't need to fix the situation, but a lot of times people just want an ear or a shoulder to cry on. Watch your language. Instead of using you should kind of things, ask questions or ask what kind of feedback they actually want in terms of how you can support. Offer accountability. Ask their if they want this, but do you want to be held accountable for getting 5 networking meetings on your calendar? Or maybe this is just something that they want to have for themselves. Change the subject. Job search is not everyone's 100% goal all the time. We have lots of other things going on in our lives, and so there's lots of other things to talk about. Catch them doing things well. So let's celebrate those wins when they come along. Again, ask for what they need rather than assuming what they need. And especially in the world we live in today, this is not an unusual situation. So it's okay to just make sure that people don't want to feel like they're the only one going through this. Offer distractions. Hey, I know you've been sitting at your desk for hours. How about we go take a walk around the block? That kind of thing can sometimes help. Especially if you're the partner of someone or a parent of someone looking for a job, then how do you make sure that you're managing your own emotions? And one of those ways is to have your own super team to support you through that process. So just a couple quick ideas there. And with that, I think we're at the Q&A. So I will pass it back to Jen. I just appreciate all the different ideas and questions that have been coming in, and look forward to answering some specific questions.
Great, thank you, Lauren. I really appreciated all your advice, having done this work for a long time, but also having my husband recently go through the job search. He landed a job, and so I always appreciate not only what do we personally go through, but how do we help those around us. So thank you. So I'll start off with a couple questions that we had submitted prior to the webinar, and then we'll move into others that people are putting into the Q&A. So quite a few people had questions around some of the challenges that they're having in their job search, perceiving that these might be obstacles that they can't overcome. One theme was around returning to work if you've taken a break from work for whatever reason. The other one is, job searching at a certain age, usually if you're over 50. What would be your advice in these situations?
I think you used a word at the beginning there, Jen, that I want to highlight, perceived obstacles. I think there's a lot of ways that you can turn these into positives. You just need to make sure, first of all, that you personally believe it, that you have positive things to bring to an organization, and that you're framing it that way for yourself and your audience. So that reframing that I was talking about earlier is a perfect example of how do you turn, hey, I'm over 50, nobody hires people over 50, or I haven't worked in 10 years, I don't have the skills. Those are self-limiting beliefs, the self-talk that I was talking about earlier, that will damage your mentality as you're going forward. So I would choose to look at it in a different direction. So if you have a whole career's worth of experience, how do you look for companies that are going to value that? And how do you make sure, first of all, that you're really clear, going back to your personal brand, of the value you're bringing through that experience? And then, what are the things that you're very clear on in terms of salary expectations, what you will take or what you won't take? And so maybe some of those, get some data as well. So what are the, because a lot of times one of the perceptions is that people won't hire older professionals because they're too highly paid. So then get some data around what the actual job market is for the types of companies and the types of roles that you're looking for. So you can go in with a data-driven negotiating standpoint rather than here's what I used to make, so therefore that's what I deserve to earn. So there's a couple different parts to this. Most importantly, I think, is the mindset around that and the branding process is going to be critical to making sure that you're really clear about the value you bring to an organization and bring examples of how your experience has benefited companies in the past and how you will bring value to another organization, and then that other data-driven piece. And the other thing, let's say you're out of the workforce for a little longer because of raising children, same kind of thing. I'm sure you've done 100 other things that use a lot of transferable skills that can then be translated into great stories for an interview.
Great, and we got a question that kind of relates to this in the Q&A. And for those that maybe haven't worked on their personal brand, maybe they have many years of experience or not a lot of experience, how would they start that process?
Well, personal brand at its basics is really just thinking about, what do I want to be known for and who am I at my best? So, in a very, very simplistic standpoint, you can start with just asking those kind of questions. I recommend going to friends and family, people that you trust who are going to give you constructive and honest feedback, and saying, what do you think I'm really great at? What have you seen me do exceptionally well? Where have I performed really well? What do you think my strengths are? Ask those same questions of yourself. Give it a very honest assessment of yourself rather than kind of just pie in the sky. Get very specific. Also, think through, what are some very specific things that you have, that you brought to an organization in terms of when you did something really well, when you got promoted, what were you doing, or what accomplishments happened so that you got that recognition? And those are the building blocks then of personal brand, so that you can then be very clear about the value you bring to an organization. And especially if you can articulate that in terms of like, hey, I've brought real dollar savings to an organization by some of your behaviors or your experience, or I help companies grow their top line, or I help companies with, I'm a great process person, and here's how this has been exhibited in my career, and how companies have then been able to streamline major processes because things that I've done. So you want to get very specific, and best case scenario, you include some numbers or some stories as to how you've done that as well.
Great. So this is both something that we saw in the questions beforehand and coming up in the chat again. And I think I'll use this word. Somebody explained networking as maybe also an endless road. So let's say you're out there and you feel like you're doing everything you can to network, but you're really not going in the direction that you want, or you're not getting a lot of response back. What's your advice for that situation?
That's a great question, because I'm sure a lot of people are spending a lot of time right now doing those outreaches on LinkedIn. The number one thing I would focus on there is, how do you make it about the person you're networking with rather than make it about yourself? All of us are driven towards how we can help ourselves. What's in it for me? And so if you can make your networking outreaches about something that is going to benefit them, rather than, a lot of times what I see with networking is, hey, I'd love to catch up because I see that you work at this company and I'd like to work at this company. Or looks like you've had a great career, I'd love to hear about your career path. Those kinds of networking outreaches are about you and what you want from them. So then how can you start to build a relationship based on things that actually matter to that person in the other seat? So that's probably the number one piece of advice, is maybe tweak how you're networking with people so that you can get their attention in a little bit of a different way. And again, be very clear on the value you're able to bring as well, so you can help people see how it's not going to be just a waste of time for them to talk.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. And as people are considering applying for different jobs, if we kind of move into that, should people apply if they don't meet all the requirements? And how would you stand out if you don't meet all the requirements? I think this is common, that people wonder when and how they should actually apply.
Yeah. Well, this is a great question for everybody, but especially for women, because there's actually studies out there that show that a man will apply to a job if he meets 60% of the requirements, and a woman won't apply to a job unless she meets 100%. And so women in a lot of these cases aren't even applying, and you never know what would have happened. So what I would say is, if there's a job you're very interested in, but you don't know if you fit the requirements, apply anyway. There's no reason why you shouldn't. I heard someone say once that it's your job to identify if you're interested in a particular role. It's the company's job to find out if you actually can do the job they need. And so your only job here is to figure out, am I interested in this job? The other thing is, even if you're not perfectly suited for a particular job, if it's a company that you're really interested in, begin that networking process so that you can start to get to know various people in the departments and in the organization, so that even if you're not the right fit for that particular job, maybe you're going to be top of mind for the next job. And you all hear the stats about, well, so many jobs aren't even published. And most jobs actually are published. A lot of times they might be published though with someone already in mind. And so this is a perfect example where you might already be at the top of the list because you didn't quite meet the criteria for this job, but they were like, she's going to be perfect for this one.
Great. I think that's wonderful advice, because I think standing out is related to both your personal brand and networking, which are two things that you talked a lot about as well. This is, I think, also an important question that's come up. There are many industries that have been impacted more by COVID than others. So we have some people that have been doing work, maybe they've lost their job. They need to stay positive, but it's also challenging because they have to make a pivot at this time due to their industry dynamics. How do you stay positive during this time?
That's a really good question. I think, it's very easy to just start to go down this negative spiral. So the first thing is, it sounds like some of the people that asked this question, it sounds like they're in touch with their emotions in the first place of, what's going on. But then on the other hand, then I would say in this case, celebrate the wins that you have. Keep making progress. One of the things that we know about a sense of well-being is being able to be moving forward, making some sense of progress. Actually, and this is the same kind of thing for people in a job, that a lot of times, we hear people complaining about not getting any feedback from their manager. Even negative feedback is preferable to no feedback at all. So how do you search for that feedback, and then also keep moving forward little by little so that you can celebrate those little wins, feel the accomplishment of crossing something off of your to-do list. Those things are little examples, but then also just make sure that you're taking time to take care of yourself as well. So what are those self-care rituals that add value to your life? Maybe it's taking a break for some yoga or meditation, or making sure you're staying connected with your faith groups. For example, there's a lot of people that really lean on certain networks or certain support that are especially challenged right now. So making sure you're taking care of yourself through this is another way to think through that. So just a couple ideas there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Staying positive is so important during that time. So we've had some people, as we've noticed, a theme, maybe people are re-entering the job market for a variety of different reasons. And one of the things that's coming up in some of the questions is about resumes. Resumes might look different than they have in the past, although we know networking and your brand is important. What is your advice for somebody that has not done their resume in a long time? They might look different. There's the applicant tracking systems. Where should they start? What's some ways for them to basically modernize their resume?
Sure. Well, the resume, despite the fact that it's not the one and only job search tool that you need these days, it still is an important part of the search. And so you want to make sure that you are making your resume stand out by talking about the value you're bringing to an organization and a particular role. So while it's good to have kind of like your plain vanilla resume, you will want to make sure that you're adjusting your resume for each opening that you're applying for the benefit of the reader in the case of an internal referral, as well as the applicant tracking system. Ways to do this: look at the job description and make sure you're using the words exactly like they are put in there for the applicant tracking system. So if they say vice president, you say vice president. If they say product management, then you say product management. Don't say product development, as an example. So make sure you're tailoring your resume along those lines, and then make sure you're highlighting the value that you're bringing through your personal brand front and center. The other piece, and I think this part hasn't changed, you want to use as many numbers as possible. So it's great to say, you know, here's all the things that I did, but you want to be able to make that measurable in every bullet as much as possible.
Wonderful, thanks. So this will be our one last question, and I think this is one that I get often asked as well. How can you focus on networking and the benefits of the other person when you know you're really looking for a job, right? Especially, I think, when the emotions run high, this is really hard. If you're up against, you know, whatever your financial constraints are, how do you do this when you know in the back of the mind you just want the job, but you can't come out and ask that? We all know that.
That is a great question, because there's a fine line between saying, can you get me, you know, an introduction to this person, and then, you know, just networking for networking's sake. So I would say, if there is a particular job that you are interested in at a company, there is absolutely every reason in the world why once you're in the door and having the conversation, you should bring that up. So we're not networking and just shooting the breeze here, that you want to make sure that you're coming across as credible and that you're bringing value, and that the person that you're talking to is actually going to look good for passing you along to the next person. And that can be done in a variety of ways. I've heard one executive, for example, connect with a former high school friend who didn't know his professional capacity at all. So he said, hey, you know, let's connect and let me do just this tiny little project for you. So he did a little bit of kind of pro bono consulting so he could show the extent of his capacity. Then that individual felt comfortable saying, yes, I'm going to pass you along to the next person. But there's no reason why you can't be open and honest about your intention. I mean, people are not idiots about the networking process, but you also don't want it to be just, hey, can you get me an introduction to this person? You have to be clear about the value you're bringing. And again, make it about them.
Thank you so much. I think I'm turning this back over to Mary Ray, but thank you for your insights and your willingness to share. I'm sure it's helped many people move forward in their process. So thank you. And Mary Ray, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much.
Lauren and Jen, thank you so much for participating today. That was fantastic. And I know I got a lot of great information, so I'm sure our other 150 people that were on this webinar did as well. So thank you again. And to our audience, we look forward to seeing you all again soon. We encourage you to visit the digital resources and virtual connections page on the WashU Alumni Association website to learn about more ways to connect with your WashU alumni parents, students, and faculty. And thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you so much.